Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, bringing you, this fan-based, band-endorsed podcast. Everything Uriah Heep recorded in the studio to your ears, little sections at a time. And today we are going over one of the last tracks on Totally Driven, and then we'll be heading into Celebration. So before we do that, though, it is Monday. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. My weekend was pretty busy with podcasts and recording, but you know what? That's what I love doing. So it's fine for me. Want to give a couple of quick shout outs. Of course, Dave White, the guy who does the website, does the social media, everything except Instagram, does the Facebook group, all that stuff. Really great work on the website, uriah-heep.com. where you can find stores to their music and merchandise. Please take a look at that. It's really quality stuff. You know, a lot of bands have merchandise that, you know, I've gotten some of it and it's just not that great a quality. I can say that the stuff I've purchased off of the Uriah Heep site, every bit of it, absolute quality. So great stuff there. Go check it out, uriah-heep.com. Dave also has another site, mick-box.net. Check it out. Definitely check it out. You can also find there in the Uriah Heep store the Everyday Rocks box set from BMG, 7 picture discs, 7 t-shirts, a wall calendar, lyric cards, all the good stuff. And I can tell you the artwork on the picture discs, on the sleeves is absolutely phenomenal, beautifully restored, and some alternate pics as well, which is really nice. And the discs themselves, really nice and thick picture discs, great quality stuff. T-shirts are fantastic, really soft, comfortable material. Definitely worth it, guys. Definitely worth it. And you can also check out the Choices box set, 7 CDs. I think it's 7 CDs now, all from different members of the band, past and present, picking out their picks for what you should experience if you're new to Uriah Heep. They're sort of best of, if you will. And it is probably tough too, because, you know, even at the time that there were different times when the CDs were done, because they added to the collection after a while, so many songs to choose from. Even if they only had 20 albums out at the time that they originally did it, that is so much material to choose from. How do you even pick your favorites? Because if you give them a list right now and you give them a list 20 minutes from now, it could be completely different. So it's what they picked in that moment. But it's really cool. It's not too expensive. It's a very nice box set. Real nice quality, great imagery, and you get the cards and all that. So really good stuff. Also, I want to give a shout out to everyone who has shared this page, who have given reviews or ratings on the various social platforms or the podcast outlets. That really helps people see the show. So thank you very much, especially those that have taken the time to do like actual written reviews. I appreciate it. Whether you were in support of the show or not, I appreciate you taking the time to do that. Also, want to thank Cakewalk by BandLab, who is the program that I record and edit the show in. Podbean, who is the distributor of the podcast currently. My graphic artist, of course, Scott Lazinski, who did such an amazing job on the graphics, also did the cover for my 3rd Vegas book and all 3 Universal Court books. Always does a great job. I've known the guy for 30 plus years now. Total quality guy. Also want to thank Audionamics. You guys know I will not do a podcast without Instant Dialogue Cleaner. That's almost true. I had to do a couple as I was rounding out the end of my time on Windows 8.1. I was starting to have some problems getting it to load, so I had to find an alternative. I was not very happy with it. It was good. I mean, it was fine. But, IDC just does such a great job, and it's very simple to use it. That is always my number one go-to plugin for cleaning up audio. Also, Isotope, I use their D-Click. And then with Waves, I use Vocal Writer, Sibilance, and Deep-Breath. And then Sonatus, I have just a light compressor that I use. Sonatus is part of Cakewalk by BandLab, but you can use any compressor and just set it at, very light settings just to kind of smooth out the volume a little bit. Whatever vocal rider doesn't pick up, this one will. So there's all of that. Also, my friends at the Deep Dive Podcast Network, go check out deepdivepodcastnetwork.com. Nate from the Deep Purple Podcast does an amazing job maintaining that website. Latest episodes, all the streams are there. You can just click on that. And, each of the shows on the network, their most recent episode will appear there. I feel like I probably monopolize that website quite a bit when shows are streaming, because I do 4 shows a week. A lot of shows are once a week. Most shows are once a week. And then so there's like 4 shows of the Magicians Podcast, 1 show of the Deep Purple Podcast, 4 more of the Magicians Podcast, 1 of the Deep Purple Podcast. So I'm sorry, guys, for dominating that. But, the show schedule is what it is. And that's how the website works. But it's great. It's comprehensive. It's got everybody on it. And thank you, Nate, for maintaining all of that. Also, shout out to Brandon at Metallicast, my favorite Metallica podcast. Just caught up with Brandon recently. He's doing great. I was glad to hear that. And so let's get into today's show. We are talking about the song Universal Wheels. And this one is, of course, off of the Sea of Light album, the band's 19th studio album. And this was song 5. I covered this back on November 12th of 2021, just after covering Mistress of All Time with Dave White. That was a lot of fun. Immediately fell in love with that song. Was really excited to go back and review it again. Still a little bummed they didn't redo it on one of these, remake albums. But, 25, 20, however many albums they had out at the time each of these were recorded, you can't do them all. And I get that. That just happens to be a personal favorite of mine. So Universal Wheels, let's get into it. Here we go. Yeah, I really like the intro. That's a really great kick drum sound. I love it. It's big, but it's punchy at the same time. A little louder in the mix than the guitar, though, which kind of makes the guitar sound a little bit thinner, but it's a nice distortion level. Got a good drive to it. I like the riff. It reminds me, and I don't know if I made this connection when I reviewed this song the first time, but it reminds me of the opening track of Whitesnake's album, Saints and Sinners, Youngblood is the name of the song. It has a similar kind of guitar riff to it, if I remember right. And I'm pretty sure it had the same kick pattern to it. It's hard to recall a song when I'm listening to another song, but I'm pretty sure that that's the one. And that was Ian Pace and John Lord on that album. Definitely a combination that you absolutely cannot go wrong with, as we saw in Whitesnake and we saw in Deep Purple. Shout out to Nate and John at the Deep Purple Podcast. Love that show. Anyway, let's get back to the song. I love how big and full the band sounds here. Love that organ swell coming in and adding the organ to this. Just the whole thing sounds really full, and I like that. Very powerful. I feel like everybody's together. I feel like we're in a really big room and they've got it cranked up on the speakers. Yeah, Bernie sounds great here. I don't know how natural it is for him to sing this way. It sounds like he's really pushing his voice, but this could be just how he sings. This could be his comfort zone. But he always sounds so good when he does it. There's just that grit in his voice and that power and passion that I always appreciate and enjoy coming from him. I think I remember too the round and round and round part. For those of you who don't know, I'm a co-host on another podcast called Backtracks Aerosmith Revisited. And one of my favorite Aerosmith songs, this one off of Toys in the Attic, is called Round and Round. And they do that same thing. It's like every song that is called Round and Round, and many songs that aren't, like they just have to go round and round and round. And like they have to repeat that as if they're on a carousel that's moving really quickly. So I always find that a bit amusing. I love the bass on this too. I love that little slide that comes in right as he talks about the universal wheels, kind of fitting. It feels like it's going around the way that the note is pitching on that. The bass in this band has always been such a highlight, where a lot of bands, I feel like it's just there because you need low end, especially in pop music. It's not often used as such a creative instrument the way that this band does it. And there's a few other bands. I mean, if you think of bands like, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Deep Purple, King Crimson, the more, I guess, progressive bands are very creative with bass playing in general. But here, that's one definite big highlight from Uriah Heep is bass guitar. Now we're back to the backing vocals that sound more like what you would expect from a Uriah Heep song. They sound really good too. A nice return to them. I'm loving the drive in this song. I'm sure I liked it the first time. There were only a couple that I wasn't a huge fan of, but this couldn't have been one of them unless this version is just so different. But I like what I'm hearing in this one. And it's a pretty good mix too, I have to say.
Gusting up to 50 miles an hour, and waves of 30 feet high in places. Chances of survival of the water are limited for anyone in conditions like this. 4 lives have been lost, 155 homes destroyed, and 500,000 hectares have been burned in what's been described as the worst fires to hit the state.
I don't know if those are the samples from the original song, but I would imagine so. Either way, they're mixed really well in. They definitely sound like a news report. Could be real, could be scripted. I don't know, but I like the mix of them. The volume in there, the tone of it, definitely sounds like it was coming from a TV, which is nice. Kind of gives it that realism. But I really like the music behind it. That's pretty cool. That would be a good solo space for Mick or Phil to play over too. Really powerful. I really like the sudden change and the shift in the song.
Homes will be boarded up.
That horror struck when hundreds of students and teachers were trapped in a
There's no
fire.
word yet as to the cause of the blaze.
That was a really killer fill from Lee Kerslake there. I love the energy that he plays with. I mean, it always just fascinates me how good of a drummer he really was. That was a killer solo, but I'm trying to decipher what he used to do it. It sounded like a piano on top of a Hammond, but more like maybe an electric piano in the higher registers with the organ, but it would have been played like perfectly together. I didn't really see any separation of notes, but it definitely felt like a layered tone. It also could have been a layered patch that was created on the synthesizer, where basically you have combination opportunities. You can blend sounds together. Like some will allow you to do 2, some 4, some will go up to 8 voices. And you can just say, you know, when I hit the key, I want you to play all of these sounds at the same time. So it could have been that, but Phil's such a good player. I could also see him just doing it that way. Could also be done with 2 keyboards where you're playing, you know, one hand on each. Lots of possibilities, but in the studio, you can do all kinds of things. But Phil is that good of a player. He could have just done that on 2 different boards or 2 different takes, and wouldn't be surprised if he did it that way.
98.6, waiting in the ground. And when she opens up this world, we humble to the sound. You see, there's only one real power, creating light by the hour. See the universal wheels. See the universal wheels. See the universal wheels. They go round and round and round and round.
Even Ronnie James Dio didn't sing that passionately about a wheel, and he was always singing about never-ending wheels.
Round and round and round and round and round. They're going round.
What a great bass line through this last couple sections, and another blistering solo from Mick. Loving the sound of his guitar on this one. I feel like I say that on every song, but I do love his guitar tone. There are guys that, you know, they're good guitarists, but I just don't like the sound of their guitar. It's too much distortion. It sounds too thin, you know, different things. But Mick, I've always dug his sound.
which measured 7.2 on the Richter scale, struck just before 6 this morning.
With nightfall, the city had turned into a vision of hell.
Well, if you weren't sure before, you can definitely tell that Mick can play with the best of them. I mean, that was some fantastic playing right there. He definitely can play fast, but even when he does, it's always tasteful. It's always within the construct of the song. And I feel like there are some shredders out there that, you know, that I don't like because they just kind of go wherever and forget that there's a song behind them. It's almost like they think that they're in the room by themselves and they just play whatever. And it doesn't always fit the song, at least for me. I've never been a big fan of that style, but with this kind of playing, it works for me. You know, I said on my other show, the Haskencast podcast, when I reviewed Yngwie Malmsteen's first two albums, which I really like, but there are times when his playing just loses me as far as the song goes. I get the guy can do it and he's very good at what he does. But for me, it sometimes just takes me out of the song more than carries me along with it. And a solo for me, my perfect solo would be something that replaces the vocalist for that section, does something different and interesting instead of just, always carrying the vocal line when the vocalist isn't there, because that's a little too easy to do. But if that's what the player feels, then that's what they feel. You can't deny them that. But I like something that makes me feel what the singer would make me feel if they were there, but something different, like a different delivery than what a singer would bring. Otherwise, just add another verse. What would be the point? And that's one of the things I've always loved about Mick's playing, is that he nails that for me. He's been on the edge a couple times. Like if he just went any further, like with this one, If he went any further than what he did, it would start getting in that territory of too much for me. But he stayed within that boundary. And he's been there a couple times with my taste level. And but I can't recall a single instance where I ever thought he went too far. If there's one, I'm sure somebody will remember where it was, but I can't think of a single time I've ever not liked one of his solos. I've maybe wanted more, like maybe that was only 8 bars and I wanted 12 or 16 or something like that. That was more likely a complaint, or maybe something about the mix where I couldn't really hear him as well as I wanted to. But I don't think from a performance standpoint, there's ever been anything I didn't like. I could be mistaken. There might have been one or two, but I don't recall ever saying I didn't like that solo. I just went back and did a comparison of this and the original version. It does sound like the same sound bites, and it does sound like the same recording. So they must have stored those away somewhere and had access to them, or gone back to the original master of Sea of Light and copy those out of there into the newer song. Interesting, though, because the tempo on the new one is faster. But, in a section like that where you're doing, speech over music, as long as the music section is long enough, and when you speed the music up, that shortens the time of the section. But as long as it's long enough, or you can record it longer to compensate for the length of time. And I think they did that really well. It's interesting that they were able to retrieve those original sound clips. Sometimes a band will have an archivist that will hang on to that stuff. Sometimes they're just really organized. Mick might have control of all of that because it's really his band. Who knows? But in any case, doing a comparison between the two, yeah, this newer version is faster, but it does seem to have the original sound clips. I only listened to a couple, and they sounded exact, so I didn't listen to the rest. They may have replaced one or two. I don't know. I didn't go that far into it. Because basically I'm just here to look at this version. And I have to say this version is really good. It's got a great energy and drive to it. The band seems like they're really into it. I love the changes. I love the music underneath the broadcast parts, and nice solos from Phil and Mick. Yeah, this is a really good version of the song. I don't know, which one I would like better. It's hard to say when there's a version that's faster. I don't know. I tend to like the one that's a little bit faster, and especially with songs I'm not incredibly familiar with. But yeah, this is a good song. I'm sure I liked it the first time. I can't imagine I didn't, and I really dig this version. Really energetic, really powerful, great performances from everybody. You can't go wrong. You just can't. So that is our show today, guys. We will see you tomorrow. We've got 2 songs left to cover on this album, and then we're on to Celebration. Cheers. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magicians Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show. And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!